Welcome to Discovering True Health, where our goal is to provide you with cutting-edge health information through research, interviews with experts, and personal journeys to true health. Our message is a message of hope and healing, and our mission is to bring you on a journey to discovering true health, to not only find wellness, but to thrive. Hello and welcome to Discovering True Health, your weekly deep dive into health and wellness. Thank you so much for joining us today. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button to stay up to date on all our upcoming shows. We also have a lot more great information on our website, Instagram, and Facebook. All those links are below. Now, today we're going to be learning all about hypnosis. We're going to start with the basics, how it works, what types of things it can help us overcome, and find out if we can be hypnotized without knowing it. And then we'll be specifically getting into how hypnosis can help us overcome stress. We've talked a lot on the show with experts about how stress is very detrimental to our health. Chronic stress puts the body into a catabolic state of breaking down. It suppresses our immune system and causes a lot of other detrimental health issues. So hypnosis is one of the great tools we can use to help us overcome and manage stress. Now, we also have a gift for all of you watching. My guest today is going to give us a complimentary hypnosis session at the end of the show to help us manage and overcome our stress. So stay tuned for that coming up later at the end of the show. So without further ado, my guest today is Chao. He's founder and owner of the Morpheus Clinic for Hypnosis. He's also a consulting hypnotist and certified instructor for the National Guild of Hypnotists, and he's a certified 5-path hypnotherapist. Now, at his practice, he uses results-based hypnosis, which cuts through the unprovable methods of hypnotherapy and provides a practical framework for helping clients get results with hypnosis. So Luke, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm really excited to learn a lot more about the benefits of hypnosis and how we can manage our stress using this tool.
Thank you for having me, and I'm glad to be here.
Now, I'd love to start with hearing a bit about your journey. So now, what inspired you to become a hypnosis expert, and how has hypnosis helped you in your personal life?
Well, the expertise kind of came later in life. I would say that I first got into hypnosis just kind of out of an interest in philosophy and psychology and how people think and how people might be able to think better to improve the quality of their lives. I wouldn't say I was a very happy kid, so I often went to the library, buried my head in books, and in my teenage years, much of what I had read was about the mind and about meditation, about hypnosis, about the related discipline of NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. And it was after university where I had to choose a career path that I kind of went back to hypnosis as a potential occupation. And hypnotherapy in most jurisdictions is not regulated. Usually it's taught through certification programs, much like fitness training, much like yoga instruction. It's, the quality of the education varies. So I took a certification program, I took some other workshops, I took more advanced courses, read a whole lot more, started this practice where I'm sitting in right now in 2006. So we celebrated 15 years at 15 Elm Street last year.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And during these 15 years working with clients, I would say that's kind of how I developed the expertise, where much of what I'm doing today and many of the ways I conceptualize hypnosis or explain hypnosis differ from what I had learned 15 or 20 years ago. And often what I'm saying about hypnosis differs from my colleagues today. So that's the story. I would say it's my clients chose me. If I didn't have clients coming back over and over again, if I didn't have people referring their friends to me, I wouldn't have developed any expertise. I started this 15 years ago, not actually knowing that at almost the age of 40, I would still be doing this.
Mm.
But the clients I've had seem to have liked the work that I did. So I kept doing it. And at this point, I'm deeply entrenched enough. I can't imagine myself doing anything else.
Wow. Now, have you personally used the tool of hypnosis for yourself, and has it helped you kind of, shift things in your life that you've wanted to shift?
Yes, absolutely. So the part of the story I kind of left out um, inadvertently is when I was a teenager, I mentioned I wasn't a very happy kid. And I had quite a lot of anxiety, particularly social anxiety, which manifests as a fear of public speaking. And I had kind of, looked for different techniques and methods to overcome this. Unfortunately, at the time, I felt like I had to do it on my own. Today, I've been through years of traditional psychotherapy. At the time, as a child, I kind of felt like I had to do it on my own. So I would kind of make these recordings where I would be um, I would put on my best hypnotist voice, and this is when I was like 14 years old. So I would talk like a hypnotist, talk to myself um, like a hypnotist, like I am my own client, record it, and then listen back to it.
Wow.
And even today, I believe that's a better way of doing hypnosis than trying to be the guide and the follower simultaneously. I think it's better to play the role of the hypnotist and record yourself, and then play the role of the client and listen to yourself because they're two
Oh,
different mindsets.
right. And nobody knows you as well as you and what you're looking to do.
Yes, the only downside is
Mhm.
most people hate the sound of their own voices. And
Yes.
I would count myself among them.
Mhm.
So I would say that these days I've come to see hypnosis as sort of a method to bypass people's usual ways of thinking so they can adopt new ideas. But I almost take for granted that most people can go into hypnosis and fairly easily. The hard thought is in what ideas you're going to communicate while they're in a hypersuggestible state, because not all ideas are equally worth stating or internalizing.
Right.
Many of my clients, they suffer under unnecessary stress because they have a distorted or maladaptive view of themselves or how the world works. And if we give them a clearer view of themselves or how the world works, they're going to stop causing the unnecessary suffering. And they're going to be joining their more happy, confident friends who live in the same world. So these days, I don't actually think as much about how I'm going to get someone into hypnosis as I think about what are the best ideas I can communicate while they're listening very carefully to me.
That's so important. Now, let's start with the basic kind of an understanding of how hypnosis works, because a lot of people out there, I think, might not know too much about it, or maybe they've never, really heard about, how it works or how it can work. So from what I've learned, have actually worked with hypnosis for a while at certain periods in my life. So I've learned it's one of the few modalities that can affect and work with us on the subconscious level and help shift old habits, beliefs, and behaviors in our subconscious mind. Now, I know you don't use the term subconscious as much in your work, which, I'm looking forward to kind of hearing more your explanation and how you view it. But how and why is hypnosis effective, and how is it able to kind of target, root out, and change those unwanted habits, beliefs, and behaviors?
Great question. So I'll kind of give you the standard explanation, which does incorporate the idea of the subconscious or the unconscious mind. And then I'll give you the explanation that I tend to use these days. And I want to point out that the practice of hypnosis started before Freud. So Freud is the originator of the unconscious mind or the subconscious mind, but people have been performing practices that are basically hypnosis for hundreds, or some would say even a couple of thousand years
Mm.
before Freud, in various forms of ritual. So the sleep temples in Egypt, for example, or Mesmer is probably the most famous example of a pre-Freud hypnotist. So we don't actually necessarily need the concept of the subconscious mind to explain how hypnosis works, but it is a helpful concept. So I'll start with sort of the standard explanation, which is that we have a conscious mind. Those are our analytical, rational, conscious thoughts. We also have a subconscious or an unconscious mind, which are all those feelings and impulses and desires and drives that are below the threshold of conscious awareness. And the analogy that I'll use, which I've heard attributed to William James, is that your conscious mind is like a rider sitting on a horse, and the horse is your unconscious mind. And when everything goes smoothly, you can think that you're going to say quit smoking, or you're going to stick with a diet plan, and then your horse takes you there, and then there's no problem. But people will seek out help or seek out hypnotherapy because they feel like the horse, the unconscious mind, is going in a very different direction than what they rationally, consciously want for themselves. So that's kind of the standard explanation, where hypnosis is a way we kind of speak to the unconscious mind. We speak to the metaphorical horse after listening to the rider about where they want to go. Um, the reason I've kind of uh, been explaining hypnosis without this concept is because it often raises more questions than it answers. So the way I usually explain hypnosis these days is this. On the client side, they're capable of learning new perspectives and attitudes, right? So we human beings, we have big enough brains to be lifelong learners. We learn not just knowledge, not just skills for work, we also learn perspectives and attitudes, so that if we're born in the 20th century, we can be in the 21st century with a 21st century worldview. This is a good thing. So on the client side, when they're being hypnotized, they're turning into their inner world, and they're absorbing attitudes and perspectives that are perhaps more current or more accurate, or are a clearer view of themselves or their circumstances. And then on the hypnotist side, their job is to have the client turn to their inner world, and then to verbally suggest these more helpful ways of seeing things, or these more helpful ways of thinking about things, which are usually the ways of thinking that someone who doesn't have the client's problem would have. So, if we're talking about stress, if we're talking about a client who presents for stress management, I'm looking at the thinking of the most relaxed, chilled, laid back person I know or can think of. Or I might look at myself at when I am relaxed versus when I'm not, and try to identify the thought patterns that cause me to be more easygoing, as opposed to the thought patterns that cause me to stress for no reason. So, in the realm of thought, I want to look at the thinking of people who don't have the client's problem, and that's where I get the ideas that I communicate to the client. Now, that explanation, I actually used more words than the first one, but
Mhm.
I think it answers more questions than it raises, because we can all accept that a person learns throughout a lifetime. We can all accept that there are helpful ideas that give you a clear view of yourself or the world, and there are also unhelpful ideas. And we don't need the concept of an unconscious mind to understand how the specific form of communication we call hypnosis actually works. Does
Right,
that
that
make
makes a
sense?
lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense. And it's really interesting how you brought up the history of hypnosis, because I've never, it's not my expertise. I've never really looked into history. I've utilized kind of the tool of it, but that's fascinating how it's been around for, like you said, thousands of years before
Well,
we actually
So,
came to the, subconscious
see,
mind.
well, one thing I tell my clients when they ask what it feels like to be hypnotized is that if you feel like you're a kid at the feet of your favorite storyteller,
Hmm.
that is the right feeling. And through all of human history, since, before we could count, we would sit around campfires and tell stories, and we would kind of be absorbed in those stories, and we would learn life lessons from the stories that we heard even as adults. So, this is why I don't really want to kind of, see hypnosis as just a modern practice that started roughly around Freud. I want to kind of see it as the use of words and storytelling and metaphor and imagery to affect people beneficially.
Mhm. I love that. It's beautiful.
Too
Now,
many.
oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, too many people use words to affect one another detrimentally.
Yes.
We were talking about how there's protests here in Toronto where some of the signs are just garbage ideas that shouldn't be in the public sphere. And many people use their words and affect others hurtfully and detrimentally. So it's helpful to a lot of people that they can choose to be affected by words with their consent and with intent and in a way that's beneficial.
Absolutely.
But
And
please
yeah, like
elaborate.
you said, it's a good counter to, all the negative, we get a lot of negative input in this world, like you're saying, and we're watching TV or the news or, just getting a lot of negativity. So it's a great counter to kind of keep ourselves in check and really keep our inner world, our peaceful, best, highest level possible, that we can keep
Mhm.
because that's our inner world. So I love that.
Yes.
Now, what are the fundamental components or techniques of hypnosis? Because there's kind of two phases of it, I guess you could say. There's the kind of getting the person into that suggestible state of hypnosis. So, firstly, what are the kind of techniques to actually, that get a person into that suggestible state? And then after they're in that state, what are some of the common techniques? I know you kind of mentioned a bit in your last explanation, but of what techniques are used in that phase once they're kind of in that state to create change.
Well, the first phase technically is called the induction. So the induction is how we get the client to tune out of the outer world, tune into their inner world, to be physically and mentally relaxed, and to then begin accepting ideas that normally they wouldn't accept. And that's the defining characteristic of hypnosis, where in hypnosis, your belief is, sorry, your disbelief is suspended, and it's easier to accept ideas you wouldn't normally accept. There are many, many different inductions. I usually use one called the Elman Induction, and it's a process of relaxation. And as part of that process of relaxation, we ask the client to exhibit what are known as hypnotic phenomena. So that requires a bit more explanation, and I'll try to keep it as concise as possible. Um, so in hypnosis, things, people's subjective experiences are altered in ways that don't usually happen outside of hypnosis. So, for example, in hypnosis, I can suggest to a client that their eyelids have become so soft that they don't work. And even when they test their eyelids, they'll find their eyelids don't work. Now, in a normal waking conscious state, that idea is baloney and it just can't be accepted and it doesn't make any sense. But if I see the client struggle to open their eyelids, I know they've suspended their usual way of thinking and they've taken this somewhat bizarre idea um, as kind of a matter of fact. They've taken this idea above their usual rational knowledge. The other test that I'll have people do is I'll have them begin a countdown sequence. This is part of the Elman induction. And I'll suggest that at some point they're just not going to care and they're going to lose count and they'll be okay with that. Now, for most modern human beings, you start them counting down from 100 and they're going to want to reach one. It wouldn't actually be meaningful if you start someone from 100 and they actually do reach one. For most people, it's more significant if they actually just stop caring about reaching one. So that again, I'm asking people to accept an idea they don't usually accept as kind of a test, but also for the client to quote pass the test, they have to suspend their usual rational thinking. So that's the Elman induction in a nutshell. It's one of the ways we get people into hypnosis.
And is that a choice that at some point they make in the induction where they choose to do that, or is it kind of happen through the techniques you're using to get them there?
No. So I need the client's full cooperation for anything I say to have any impact. So like if you imagine an audience that's enraptured by a storyteller, that audience is not controlled by the storyteller. The storyteller just happens to be telling an interesting enough story in an interesting enough way that people put themselves in a headspace to enjoy the story. Hypnosis works through a similar kind of dynamic where I am guiding the client through their inner worlds to have them exhibit some phenomena that usually don't happen, but that are kind of cool when they realize that they can stop caring on demand. And I want to point out how important it is to, or how significant it is when someone can intentionally stop caring about ordinary thoughts on demand.
Hmm.
Because so many people will open a bottle of wine, they'll smoke a joint, they feel like they have to travel to a more tropical climate before they can stop caring about ordinary thoughts. I'm having people do it by looking to their inner worlds and cultivating, nurturing a sense that they don't have to care. This is not to be taken lightly. It's actually
No.
quite significant when someone can stop caring on demand, especially in this context we're talking about, which is stress reduction.
Absolutely, because that's our kind of conscious mind that's very chattery and we don't have control over it. It's constantly throwing these things in our heads and something spin. Sometimes we get in that loop where it's spinning and spinning and we just can't stop
Yep.
it. So I mean, to be able to get somebody to a place where they can just kind of shut off that portion of
Yes.
it is powerful.
Monks and yogis and martial artists and experienced meditators, they're doing this in their inner worlds. Because one thing I often say to my clients who come to quit smoking or to stop drinking is you can't imagine a monk with a glass of wine in her hand and a joint in the other hand, because you recognize that once you've cultivated a more peaceful inner world, these outside consumable substances are just pretty lousy solutions compared to a more authentic kind of inner peace. And monks and yogis are not different breeds of human being than you or me. They're human beings like you or me who've spent the time and effort cultivating inner peace. And, one thing I communicate to people is that you don't have to join a monastery. You don't necessarily have to take yourself out of the world to cultivate inner peace. There are some ways of thinking you can adopt as a modern human being to be less stressed. And to answer the second part of your question, which is what do I communicate once someone's in hypnosis? So once they've put aside their analytical thinking, once they're in this highly suggestible state where I can say things they don't usually accept and they accept these things, what techniques or processes do I use? And I used to use more of a technique-based approach. As a younger, as a less experienced practitioner, I often felt like I couldn't just tell the client what to think. That, who was I to tell the client what to think? So I kind of took the attitude that I'll lead the client through some processes so they can realize for themselves what better ways of thinking are. And the longer I practice, the more I know what I have to say to the client. And now I'm just straight up telling people,
Hmm.
think like this and you'll be happier. And usually I'm right.
You've
So
found your own
these days,
empowerment through it and your own kind of instinct.
well, it's also that human beings are much more similar than different, and this is often under-recognized. We often look at the differences, but we don't look enough at the similarities, which is why at the end of this conversation today, when I do the sample session, I won't have met any of your listeners, but I know I can speak to them in a way that's going to relax them. And that's because I don't have to get to know them as individuals. I just have to know they're human and they can understand the words I'm saying. And I know I can pick words that will affect them positively. So, to kind of answer the question as to what do I say once someone's hypnotized, it is the thinking of someone who doesn't have the client's problem. If we're working with stress management, it's going to be a laid back, relaxed worldview. And if they give me specific stressors they want me to address, like health anxiety or relationship conflict or work related stress, then I'll speak to them the worldview of someone who might be in a high stress job, but still takes care of themselves after 5 or 7 p.m. So I am looking in the realm of how does someone think when they're in the client's situation but doesn't have the client's problem. These days, I'm talking almost nonstop because, unlike the first maybe 5 years of my practice, I have enough past sessions under my belt that I'm quite confident that I can generalize to the human being who's in front of me based on having worked with enough human beings with similar problems in the past.
And I love how you talk about, we really need to focus more on our similarities. I think that's an important, very important point for right now, with the way everything is in the world and all the division. I think, really finding common ground and similarities and realizing, look, we're all human. We're all the same. We're all in this together.
Well, one thing I often say to my clients, and I haven't quite offended anyone with this yet. Sometimes I'm worried that the shoe's going to drop. But so one thing I often point out is we treat our pet animals much better than we treat ourselves, and sometimes we treat our pet animals better than our family.
So true.
And one thing I want to point out is if you're a dog lover or if you've ever worked with or trained dogs, you recognize that a Chihuahua is fundamentally a dog and a Great Dane is fundamentally a dog, and a Rottweiler or a German Shepherd are fundamentally dogs. That these animals of wildly varying shapes and sizes are all the same species. We can so easily recognize this. Where dogs in a dog park, they'll play with each other. The body language is going to be the same, whether it's a Chihuahua or a bigger dog. And, they can all kind of get along. Um, the point I want to make is if we can do this for pet animals, I know we can do this for fellow human beings.
Mhm.
We can see the similarities. We don't have to focus on the differences.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Love that. Now, this is another important, I think, question to have answered. So a lot of us can really understand, you know, where we can go with this tool. What are the different types of habits and behaviors that hypnosis can overcome? I know you have some general topics listed on your website, which are losing weight naturally, stopping smoking, easing fears and phobias, stop procrastinating, relieve stress, speak in public, fly
Mhm.
fearlessly, sleep faster and easier, boost sports performance. And, you know, so what is kind of the criteria around what
Yep.
hypnosis is useful for and what it's not useful for? Because we can all
Yep.
understand that.
I can speak from my own experience, and I can tell you that my experience, just out of necessity, is somewhat bounded by the laws of Ontario, where I practice. Some jurisdictions are more restrictive than others when it comes to what a hypnotherapist is legally able to do. And of course, this is my life work, so I very much have an interest in staying within those bounds. So, you know, other practitioners who have experience working with cases I decline might be able to speak about other cases, but for sure, I'm confident taking on any case where the client is suggestible enough, and there are assessments we can do for this, and I'm able to articulate a list of attitudes or perspectives that, if adopted by the client, we can reasonably expect will help them. So, if the client's problem can plausibly be helped by adopting a new set of attitudes or perspectives, I can probably help them as long as they're suggestible enough. But if I can't write out that list of attitudes, if I'm racking my brain and I'm thinking, this is not an attitude, this is not a problem in perspective. This is physical. This is a relationship issue. This is someone, not the client, but affecting the client who has the problem, then I probably can't help.
Makes a lot of sense. So my mindset shifts type,
Yes. And
issues that are beliefs
and
and
yes, and it actually covers quite a range. So smoking and weight loss, many people see as medical or physical. But I want to point out that
they're
they
habit
are
based,
habits.
belief
I
based.
approach I
Yeah.
approach them as habits and also beliefs because only smokers believe that they ever need a cigarette. If you're a non-smoker, you know cigarettes are nowhere on your list of needs. And no one's ever ended up in an emergency room because they can't get a smoke. People actually do end up in ER because they can't get a drink or they can't get heroin. No one ends up in ER because they can't get a smoke. So, um, so yeah, even these issues that might, on first glance, appear to be physical or medical in nature can be helped with a change in perspective. If a smoker stops telling themselves they need a cigarette and they start telling themselves they need a break, they need some love, they need a hug, they need a friend, they need a kind ear, they need validation, they need encouragement, then their emotional needs are going to be fulfilled. And it's going to be ridiculous, just like for any other non smoker, that they ever need a cigarette.
Right.
So, yes, even these apparently medical or physical issues can be helped by hypnosis. And I have had clients as well who've been to quite a number of doctors, and the doctors don't really have anything they could do because even if the symptoms are physical, so even if it's like IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, is quite a common example where there are dietary changes you could make. Sometimes they might prescribe some anti-anxiety medication, but there's not too much that medicine can do for IBS. But hypnosis can do quite a bit for IBS because the mind body link is very real. And this I
Yes.
want to talk about in the context of stress as well. The
Yes.
mind body link is very real. The way you talk to yourself inside your head is going to be heard by your body, and your body's going to react. If you tell yourself that bad things are going to happen, your body's going to brace for bad things happening. If you tell yourself that good things are going to happen, your body's going to get excited about good things happening. This is how it works. It's under recognized, but it's true.
Absolutely. And I've had so many guests on the show, specialists, and we've talked about IBS, and it's not physical. I mean, it has to do with our food and what we eat, but it's the gut health, and it's the brain gut connection, and it's our emotional states and what's putting us into our fight or flight and all that. So
Yep. Yep.
absolutely.
Well, I think part of the reason, just not to slam doctors, I don't want to slam doctors. I have
No, I mean,
you
everything
know,
has its
in my family.
place, but different tools are great to know about that can
Yeah.
help.
Well,
Doctors are great if you need a medication or you have a broken arm or whatnot, but if it's something mindset or emotional or
precisely.
yeah,
Medicine doesn't have too much to say
doesn't
about
address that. And even
one's
diet
inner world. Yeah,
doesn't address diet.
exactly. But that's why there are multiple professions. That's why we have dietitians, and that's why we have physical therapists and occupational therapists, and so on.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I was just remembering one of my guests on the show. She had done this whole scientific research with doing an EEG brain scan and tried all these different modalities, and hypnosis was one of them. And in her book, she talked about how she was having sleep issues. So she went to a hypnotherapist. And I thought it was fascinating because they found the root cause of her sleep issue was when she was a young child, she was watching this very scary movie, and that's what was causing her sleep issues as a grown adult. So they went back and like made the movie funny and kind of changed her memories of the movie and made it like funny and ridiculous and goofy. And that really helped her sleep, which I was like,
Yeah,
wow.
absolutely. Earlier I was talking about how people are more similar than different.
Mhm.
And I can kind of deliver one message to a large number of people without knowing too much about them and still have it resonate. One message I've been delivering to my clients who are phobic or anxious is there are no monsters in the dark.
Hmm.
And as a child, we kind of understand where, you might imagine monsters in the dark and be kept up and be scared. And it seems like a very common human experience. But as adults, we may not be afraid of literal monsters in the dark, but we are afraid that if we get into that elevator, it's not going to open. We are afraid that if we speak in front of more than 5 people, they're going to humiliate us. We are afraid if we ask this one neighbor out for dinner that he or she is going to reject us or humiliate us. And these are the adult versions of monsters in the dark. People suffer more in their minds, in their imagination, than in reality. And this is another way that hypnosis works. It's because in reality there's no threat, and your body's misperceiving threats where actually there are none. And once you fully wrap your head around the truth that there are no monsters in the dark, that there are no threats, and that they are imagined, but also there's no shame in it because everyone does it to some degree, some more than others, but to some degree, then we can all breathe a sigh of relief
Well,
because
and
our relaxation is appropriate for our circumstances. Our peace of mind and happiness are appropriate for our circumstances. We don't have to be on guard. We don't have to be bracing for an impact that never seems to come. We don't have to prepare for bad things happening.
yes, and that's the mind. The mind is wired that way. The mind is, a tiger is going to jump out of the, forest and eat you. It's still that old, we still have those
We
old programs, those old instincts. So yeah, it sounds like hypnosis can really help kind of shift kind of those and keep us from getting into that stress mode, which gets us into our parasympathetic nervous system, that fight or flight. And, that affects the gut, that affects everything.
Yeah, we are adapted to a very different world than this modern world. The modern world is so strange in so many ways. If you look at the long timeline of human history, where for most of our lives we were hunter gatherers, for most of our lives we lived in small groups. If we got kicked out of our social group, probably we died in the wilderness. That doesn't happen anymore. People are afraid of public speaking, thinking, like feeling viscerally like it's a life or death matter whether they impress their boss or not. But the feeling's out of proportion with the reality. The reality is they're going to have other employers, bidding for their time if they lose one job. But those are the monsters in the dark that
Yeah.
adults believe in.
Because those are the old programs that our mind is wired, that like you were talking about at the top of the show, how we've progressed so much in society and things are shifted forward, and 21st century as opposed to back in the day, things are different. So it's
Mhm.
really about helping our minds kind of shift its beliefs.
Yeah, to to perceive the reassuring truths, to perceive those ongoing truths that are still true tomorrow and in a week and in a month. Because if you predict that there's quote monsters in the dark, whatever form that takes, you're probably going to be wrong. If you predict that you're going to be fine and you're going to go to bed tonight and you're going to sleep and tomorrow will come, that's probably going to come true. Reality is usually much better than we stress about and much better than we worry about, but we do have to be looking for the reassuring truths or the comforting truths. And much of what I do is to bring the client's attention to and then ground them in the reassuring truths and the comforting truths that are still going to be true tomorrow or in a year or in a decade.
Such a powerful tool. Now, how many hypnosis sessions would typically be needed to start seeing a significant kind of difference or a shift toward a change?
Yeah, it's kind of hard to answer generally when I work specifically with individuals. So I'm going to give you a range as opposed to just, it's going to be a big range. So I do try to, at least in my own practice, I try to screen clients who don't seem to be very responsive to suggestion. There is the expectation that hypnotherapy works quickly. And for people of normal or high suggestibility, it usually does work relatively quickly relative to psychotherapy, for example. But then for a segment of the population who have a very hard time trusting or a very hard time letting go, they won't respond as much as the average client or the highly suggestible client, so they're less likely to be happy with their outcomes. So we try just kind of to, um, to screen for suggestibility
And that's
first.
actually some sort of testing that you do, you can
Yeah,
screen with?
in usually about a minute or two, I give a number of suggestions and see to what degree they respond. I mean, hypnosis is the use of words to affect how people feel, so we test for it by using words to affect people, and then we see how much they respond. So considering that, we do that pre-screening, the typical client can expect to feel better after session one. And I want to point out that after a first session, they will have listened very carefully in um, a very immersive state of mind to me sharing helpful thoughts for almost a full hour. So there's no magic to this. The helpful thoughts have to be shared. They have to be suggestible enough. They have to be cooperating. But when everything's lining up, an hour of careful, deep listening to high quality ideas can help a person a lot.
Mm.
And, you know, usually people are done in anywhere from 3 to 5 sessions. It's very uncommon that someone needs more than about 5 hours of listening in order to overcome whatever habit or fear or presenting issue that they have. 5 hours of listening actually is quite a lot of listening. It's one of the reasons why I've kind of shifted to this approach where I'm not depending on the client to come up with their own answers. And I'm not really looking at the potentially limitless realm of the client's memories or thoughts or imagination. I am just straight up telling clients, here's how someone would think if they didn't have your situation or if they didn't have your problem, and they're absorbing it for however many hours they want to work with me in.
Sounds like it's affirmations on steroids.
Yeah. And one thing I want to communicate is that hypnosis is not it's not the only way to accept a new way of thinking. People will change their perspectives and attitudes by listening to their friends or reading books or watching documentaries or just sitting in quiet silence and contemplating. Hypnosis is if you want to hire a professional to tell you what to think in a very specific way, or I guess other practitioners might also help you delve into your memories to look at root causes, then that's what we specialize in. But it's definitely not the only way to adopt new ways of thinking. Part of the reason I'm here is to share good ways of thinking so that people don't necessarily have to hire a professional in order to be more relaxed and happy.
I love that. Now, this is a question that a lot of people probably want to know. It's something that I'm curious about. Can an individual or group of people be hypnotized or kind of put into that suggestible state without being kind of an active participant or aware of it? Can someone influence a group of people or person through hypnosis techniques without kind of their consent, or does somebody actually have to be actively participating? I know you mentioned
Yep.
storytellers or watching TV, and that can kind of put us in that suspended disbelief as well. So is that
Yes.
possible?
So I can answer the question on a number of levels. On an ethical level, first of all, it's completely unethical to hypnotize someone without their explicit consent, um, and then to tell them what to think without their explicit consent. So on the ethical level, no. On the practical level, There is a d- discipline or branch of hypnotherapy called conversational hypnosis or covert hypnosis. It's derived from the work of actually a Phoenix, Arizona resident, former Phoenix, Arizona resident
Hmm.
when he was alive, Milton H. Erickson. He's considered one of the most uh, influential hypnotists of the 20th century. And he was a psychiatrist, and he would get referrals for cases where other doctors had no idea what to do with the patient. So he developed a covert, also, he had polio. He was confined to a wheelchair, which many people believe gave him an especially astute sense of very subtle nonverbal signals coming from people. Um, so he would work with these patients who were considered by other doctors to be resistant. And he developed his own style that's often known as Ericksonian hypnosis or covert hypnosis or conversational hypnosis, where the idea is you don't need the client's full, complete cooperation and compliance. You know, as opposed to more traditional techniques like what I practice, where we do need the client's cooperation and compliance. For ethical reasons, I only do it my way. Um, I do know conversational hypnosis techniques. Sometimes I'll weave them into a session after the clients explicitly consented for me to hypnotize them and to accept a list of perspectives. Um, you'll find books about how to apply conversational hypnosis to, for example, salesmanship. And I think you can find a book about applying it to seducing women.
Mhm.
Um, but you can see the ethical issues involved. Now, it's often rationalized as, as you say, people kind of go into a trance all the time if they're listening to a very captivating storyteller, if they're in a movie theater or a like a live action theater and they're immersed in the
When
experience.
it's affecting our emotional state and our mental state when we're watching a movie or television. So in a way, it's essentially,
Yes. So it's not like outright illegal, but to me, it's unethical. And that's probably as much as I have to say about it.
interesting. So what are some of the things to look out for this conversational hypnosis? What are the things we can kind of be like, oh, red
Yeah.
flag, that might be a technique?
Well, so I'll share an opinion, which is that I think a lot of people who get the idea in their heads that they're going to non consensually hypnotize people are not very socially graceful to begin with. So, conversational hypnosis is not, in my opinion, not an easy skill to learn. It's not a natural way of talking. It's a rather artificial, strange way of talking.
Uh,
So, I don't know too much about this, but I imagine that your alarm bells would kind of ring anyway because the person you're talking to is talking to you in a very stilted, artificial way. And if you get the sense that they're trying something on you, then
right.
possibly they are. Um, I would encourage, so if you or any of your listeners are concerned about this, I would encourage you just to search the web for conversational hypnosis patterns
Okay.
or Ericksonian hypnosis patterns. Look at what the results are, and that's those will be the same sources that a conversational hypnotist will be learning from. So then you'll kind of pick up on keywords that you might hear to understand when someone's trying to hypnotize you. But I know how conversational hypnosis works. I don't think I've ever encountered someone in real life in the wild who's tried to hypnotize me using these patterns, non-consensually at least. So, yeah.
It's good to know. I will post a link to that below so we can all look into it. All right, so let's get into how hypnosis can help us with stress. We've touched a bit on it earlier, but first, why is hypnosis able to help us manage and overcome stress? Why is it a helpful tool, particularly for stress?
Mhm. Well, earlier I talked about how you can have two people in the same situation, and one of them would be stressed, another would be chill and laid back and relaxed. And my way of thinking is to look closely at the thinking of the person who's laid back and chilled and relaxed, figure out how they think, and then communicate that way of thinking to the person who's stressed. So I'll give you some examples. Someone who's stressed might hear a little thing and think, oh my God, my day's ruined. Or it's a huge deal and I can't rest until I solve this problem. The person who's laid back will think it's actually small stuff. It's not a big deal. A person who tends to get stressed um, might have thoughts like that. Say their work has to be perfect before it's good enough. Whereas someone who's more relaxed might think there's, no perfection in writing an email, so we'll just count it as good enough and send it. So these are some examples of differences between the thinking of someone who tends to stress themselves and the thinking of someone who tends not to get stressed in the same situations. And usually I'll kind of work with clients as individuals and through dialogue, figure out what kind of thought patterns are causing stress unnecessarily, and then how someone might think in that situation so that they can still deal with whatever's at hand, but not get stressed unnecessarily. If you want to give me any examples of like unnecessary um, thought patterns that you or someone you know might want to get rid of, I'll do my best to give you a reframe on that situation. Um, but
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense because it's kind of like each individual person, we see things in our own reality, and it's based on our past experiences, and those affect how we see different things.
yeah, but your future self will be affected by your present day experiences. And if you choose to do a hypnosis session, for example, and then take on the thinking of a laid back, chill person, then
Right.
that session will be part of your memory for future days. Um, one false idea that I think a lot of people have internalized is that their attitudes are fixed after the age of 18 or 25 or 30 or whatever other arbitrary number. I have clients who are in their 60s and 70s and even 80s who are able to give up a bad habit or take on a different perspective because the human mind is that adaptable. So, one underlying premise to kind of adopt for any of what I'm saying to make sense is that you aren't stuck with the attitudes you had at 18 or 25. You're also a lifelong learner, and if you kind of if you are looking for the helpful ways of thinking or the more uh, level-headed ways of thinking or the more even-keeled ways of thinking, then you're more likely to find them. And once you find them, you can adopt them as your own. And then you're not stuck with what you had thought when you were 18 or 25 or 30.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, I know for me and a lot of people, I think a big stressor is, and especially with all the changes in the pandemic, and there's, a lot of people lost their job, or, a big stress is not the fear of, failing or not being able to kind of provide for ourselves financially, or
Yeah.
figuring that situation out, because things have changed, the job market is different. I think that's a big kind of contention of stress for a lot of people.
Yeah. And we can workshop this stressor a little bit if you like.
Right.
So if the client expressed to me that that is what's stressing them the most, just off the top of my head, here are some perspectives to consider. One, if you've been unemployed before and then it turns out your stress was for no reason because you got a decent job after some time, probably a similar thing's going to happen again. Another point of view is that old saying, this too shall pass, is very applicable here. Another point of view is that if there is a time to be unemployed, the 21st century is probably the very best time in human history, at least up to now, to be unemployed, because you're not going to end up. My guess is you have enough friends and family, you have enough skills, you have enough capacity to learn or go back to school that you're not going to end up in the wilderness trying to scrounge berries.
Being
That's
eaten by a
the
tiger.
worst.
Yeah,
What's that?
said getting eaten by a tiger.
Yes, yes. The worst case scenarios that feel like life or death don't happen. I mean, maybe your life, your quality of life might take a step back for a few months or a few years. That could happen, but that in itself is not the end of the world. And you have a future, and you're going to be productive again, and the pandemic's going to come to an end. Now that's just off the top of my head, but these are examples of how, you know, whatever situation you're in, there's probably other ways of seeing that situation. And among those other ways of seeing it, there are probably ways that are more big picture or long term focused. There are probably ways that are more relaxed or that bring your attention to the reassuring truths rather than, to what isn't or to the scary truths.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And those are all really, you know, good mindset shifts to really see things in a different way. And it's so true. You look back in your past, and you're like, okay, yeah, I have been in a situation before where I lost a job or I was without a job or, in the job market, and it did work out okay. So you got to kind of look to the past and find the evidence there.
Yeah.
And what about relationship stress? I think there's, and you touched on before, if it's another person causing the issue, but let's say there's another
Yep.
person causing the stress, but is there a way to help facilitate your reaction to it or not
Yes.
kind of getting hit as
Yes.
hard with it?
Yes. And I just wrote a couple of treatment plans for clients we did intakes with that had to do with relationship stress. So it's fresh on my mind. One attitude I'll communicate is that your worth and value as a human being, or as a partner, or as a woman, or as a man is fundamental to you and inviolable. So we recognize this for children, that they could make mistakes and they still have fundamental worth. We recognize this for older generations where someone can be old and crotchety and they just are what they are, and we give them, a certain dignity that we ascribe to human beings. Um, we each have the same dignity and worth as inviolable qualities of humanity is not just for other people. It's not just for the world's population minus you. It's for the world's population, including you.
Oh,
And often this what I see as a fundamental principle is overlooked, where we so easily give our compassion and kindness and love to others, and often we so easily withhold it from ourselves. And so one reason for this that I think I've identified is that people see compassion or love or warmth or kindness as limited in quantity, as finite. Now, as a child, you had to kind of wait for your parent to give you validation. You kind of had to, you may not have had good emotional coping skills when you were 5 years old, so you had to wait for your parent to come and give you a hug. So I think this may be where it comes from. But my clients are adults. Typically, they're adults, and by the time you reach adulthood, you take over from your parents, and you become your own biggest source of validation and encouragement and kindness. Your heart is a source of these things, and the only evidence you need is you give it to others, and they feel it. Being a source of love and kindness means you can have plenty of it for yourself too, without depriving anybody else of the same. You are not being selfish by loving yourself, you are increasing the love that's in the universe. You are not being arrogant by pursuing happiness, you are increasing the amount of happiness that's in the universe. So those are some perspectives. So having inviolable worth is important to remember for a relationship, because it means even if they break up with you still have your worth and value. Even if they cheat on you, you still have your worth and value. Even if they can't see a good thing when it's plainly in front of them, you still have your worth and value, and your friends will back this up. Your closer family members will back this up. This is not a delusion. This is not you inside your head. This is most people will back up you have inviolable worth and dignity, and your ex doesn't get to determine
Mm.
your worth or your value or your dignity. So that's fundamental. Some other ones to kind of internalize are that if your partner makes a mistake, if your partner says something stupid, if your partner cheats on you, if your partner's an a-hole, it's not your doing. It's not a reflection upon you.
Mm,
It's a burden upon your partner's conscience.
big one.
It needn't be a burden upon yours. And, it's because your partner's an adult, right? So, like, why should you, take on the burdens of their problems and bad decision making if they are an adult and they have their own mind and conscience? And so that's another perspective to adopt. And depending on the actual situation, I might have some other reframes or perspectives. But again, I'm coming back to the idea that if you are looking for the attitudes of a healthy person, you're going to find many more helpful ways of thinking than if you look at your own thinking or the problematic thinking. So that's where I tend to look.
Those are so powerful. So hypnosis basically will take, a lot of those powerful, views and beliefs will, put you in this state where you're kind of altered, and
Yes.
then it will kind of install them, I guess, so to speak, into your
Yeah.
own
Well,
beliefs, or a
I've,
shift.
I, yeah, I've described the feeling of being hypnotized as kind of like you're a kid at the feet of your favorite storyteller. Only you can be an adult. You could even be 70 years old and feel like a kid at the feet of your favorite storyteller. That's a good feeling. That feeling should never go away, at
Mhm.
least sometimes. So, in hypnosis, so right now, just kind of hearing these ideas, you're hearing it with your intellect. You're hearing it more with your mind than with your heart. And there's already a huge gap in most people between their minds and their hearts, where they think something and they know something, but they haven't quite internalized it or they don't believe it for themselves. So, with hypnosis, we do want people to suspend disbelief, to suspend analytical thought, to suspend their usual mode of thinking, and metaphorically to listen with their hearts. And then I say the things I say, the same kinds of messages I've shared with you in this conversation. But because the client will be in such a state that they've suspended their disbelief, at least as much as they can, and they're listening with their hearts, my words will have more of a visceral impact, almost like they're a kid at the feet of their favorite storyteller.
Right.
So, in a nutshell, that's how it works,
Wow.
at least the way I practice it.
Yeah, your work is so powerful. Now let's do one more. Let's talk about fear and stress from the pandemic. I know there's a lot of extra stress from getting ill or getting around that, I might get sick, and what happens if I get sick? And, there's kind of stress
Yep.
coming from all different angles around that. So I guess it's kind of
Yep.
it's a big one. It's a very
I
non-specific.
I would love to address this. And also, I can share with you afterwards some links to some sessions I've already recorded for pandemic stress,
Wonderful.
where in the spring or early summer of 2020, when no one knew what was happening, my client load dropped to a very slow trickle. I was feeling helpless, and I decided I don't have to feel helpless when I can use words to bring comfort to anyone who would listen to them. So I do have a number of pre-recorded sessions that are meant to help with pandemic related stress, and I'll share those links with you. But in 2022, the situation's kind of changed. We're not as panicked as we were in 2020.
Mhm.
And there's unfortunately sort of been this normalization of just the COVID as a normal part of life these days. But I'll share with you some perspectives for health anxiety in general, or stress relating to the pandemic more specifically. One of them is that as long as you can take a breath, you're still among the living. Now, in the past year or two, I've actually had a couple of clients who had cancer, and at least one of them passed. Um, and they sought out help, not expecting really for me to cure their cancer, but to have some comfort in the last weeks or months or years of their life. So my job is to kind of look at the thinking of someone who has cancer, but is better able to cope than the very stressed or
Mm.
unhappy person who's come to me. And I'm going to borrow a little bit from my work with them, because if these ideas can comfort someone who is bedridden with cancer, then these ideas quite possibly can help someone who's worried about the pandemic. So, one of them, like I said, is as long as you can take a breath or feel a heartbeat, you are alive. And what life does is life will heal from injury and life will heal from illness. This is what life does, as contrasted with a thing or an object that doesn't have any capacity to self heal. In this modern world, we often forget our aliveness. We see ourselves as robots or machines where, a machine comes out of the factory in its best state and degrades from there. A person doesn't work like that.
Mm.
A tree doesn't work like that. One who's alive will be growing and adapting and will be learning and will heal from injury and illness, at least until the very, very end. So that's a reassuring truth that even someone with cancer um, can believe in. And that, while we all deal with the pandemic, the fact that you can hear this means that you're still among the living. And that's meaningful. That is not to be taken for granted. That is significant. That's worth keeping in your head and heart. Um, One other perspective is while you're alive, it perhaps is better to care more about living than dying, to care more about health than sickness, and to keep putting a spotlight on all that is truthful and reassuring. Um, so, yeah, those are some perspectives that I know are true for everyone listening to this. And we individual situations, I could say more to the individual, but often we take for granted what's always there until we're about to lose it. But we don't have to wait until we're about to lose our lives before we deeply appreciate our aliveness.
Absolutely. Oh, such powerful, powerful concepts. So true. And that's what we're all about, is not just learning how to survive, but to thrive, you know, thrive and live life.
Absolutely.
Now, this has been incredible. Can you share with us kind of the best way to contact you? And your website is so much incredible information. I know um, you also have a YouTube channel, I believe. Can you kind of share what resources you have available and where to contact you?
Sure. Yeah. So the most, I guess, plentiful resource, and also the most somewhat current, would be the YouTube channel, where I mentioned that I have the free sessions I released for pandemic stress. I have a number of other free sample sessions. I have explanations of hypnosis. I have a crash course in how to hypnotize your friends, just for fun. Um, so there's a lot of content on the YouTube channel, and it's Morpheus Hypnosis. So if you go to YouTube and you type in Morpheus Hypnosis, or if you go to youtube.com/Morpheus Hypnosis, you should see my face. Um, if you are in a position to be doing private sessions with me, if you want my time and attention, you can contact the Morpheus Clinic for Hypnosis at morpheusclinic.com. we begin clients with a initial consultation, which is conducted by an employee of mine. But I will write a treatment plan. Earlier, I kind of emphasized the importance of consent. And the treatment plan essentially lists out the ideas I intend to communicate so that you can consent to what I'm saying before I'm saying it. Um, that's just how I choose to operate. Uh, so yeah, either the YouTube channel or the website would be the best next step.
Wonderful. I'll post a link to all those below, as well as the links to the pandemic complimentary sessions that you mentioned earlier. And now you're located in Toronto, Canada. For those that aren't in the area, is this something we can do via Tele Appointment?
Yes. So I have kept my office here in Toronto. And many people do kind of like to have an office that they go to. But for my clients who are not in Toronto, and it's been an increasing number, I think, because of the YouTube channel, I have actually a private server set up, and I also have some professional audio equipment on my side, because the past couple of years, I've had to do most of my sessions online. There are, some possible privacy issues with some third-party software. So yes, I am set up for high-quality, secure, private online sessions.
Wonderful. I will post links to all of that below for all of you listening. Thank you, Luke, for joining us today and sharing your wisdom on hypnosis and, giving us all these really great, kind of new thought constructs.
You're very
around
welcome.
some issues. It's incredible.
And thank you for having me on.
Now,
And
as promised, we are ending the show with a hypnosis session to help us all with stress management. So if you're driving, press pause and listen to this later. If you're not, find a comfortable seating situation that supports your head and neck where you can enjoy, relax, and close your eyes.
with your eyes closed, whenever you're ready, take a really deep breath in. Make sure you're comfortable and relaxed. Lean back. Make sure your head and neck are supported. And with every breath that you are breathing, you are feeling your own aliveness. It's aliveness that exists on planet Earth at this time as a matter of fact, just like the aliveness in a tree, or a bird, or a friend, or a neighbor is very real and very meaningful. As long as you have this aliveness, you have the most important thing a person can have. And another breath keeps proving your aliveness as a matter of fact. And perhaps even in that, you can find some comfort, you can find some relaxation. It's not a coincidence that monks from one country and yogis from another and martial artists from yet another will all sit to breathe, to find inner peace and empowerment. This breath of life gives you the oxygen to think with, to act with, to figure things out with, and to speak with when necessary. So, in every breath already, you're finding some comfort, you're finding some peace, and it's not because of me. This breath of life started quite some time ago, and it's most likely going to continue for quite some time. Give yourself credit for being the cause of the comfort that you're feeling. It means you don't have to hear me over and over. You don't even have to hear me ever again. To turn to your own breathing and your own aliveness, to find a dependable, constant, faithful source of stability and constancy and relaxation and peace. Just as you can be comforted by perhaps a pet cat or dog just breathing, or a partner just breathing your own aliveness is important enough and worthy enough and good enough to give you a sense that all is well with the world because the most important things are there. And then bring your attention to the top of your head and imagine a wave of relaxation beginning to go down deeper. With your cooperation, you can feel softness. You can feel relaxation be caused by your thoughts. My words might give guidance, but it's your thoughts, your understanding that's causing the comfort you're feeling. So feel that relaxation spread down your face and your neck and your shoulders. The mind-body link is very, very real, and you are sending some high-quality, helpful signals through the mind-body link now to tell your body very correctly that this is an appropriate time and place to relax, to feel good, to let go, to give yourself a break. You may already have noticed that your body listens excellently, just like it had listened to so many scary or detrimental thoughts in the past. It's now listening to some helpful, relaxing thoughts that you, more than I, are sending to your body. So keep giving yourself credit for being your own cause of comfort and relaxation. This mind-body link means that you don't just have to be subject to random feelings in your body. You can actually send messages of comfort and stillness from your mind to your body, and your body listens. After this session, this is a matter of fact. The mind-body link is no longer just for yogis or monks or other people. It's also for you. It's fact now. Which means perhaps you will be more selective about the thoughts you keep. And perhaps you will keep the truthful and reassuring, or truthful and inspiring, or truthful and comforting thoughts, and discard the untrue thoughts, the thoughts about what isn't. Then feel that relaxation spread down your back, down your arms. Feel the bigger muscles become softer and looser and more comfortable. More and more, sending some high-quality signals. You can feel your body as an ally, as an excellent listener. So excellent that it was bracing for bad things to happen every time you had thought in your head that a bad thing would happen. And it's such an excellent, faithful, loyal listener that when you start to prepare for the things that are likely, or even the things that are good, your body would be happy to prepare you for the things that are likely, or the things that are good. And one likelihood is this breath of life continues tomorrow, and it continues the next day, and it continues the next day after that. Most likely, this aliveness can still be felt very palpably in a month, in a year, and beyond. And as long as you have this aliveness, you have the time to heal from illness and injury. You have the time to figure out challenges and problems. And you have the most important thing. Then feel that relaxation go all the way down to the bottoms of your feet. And give yourself credit for the relaxation that you're causing. Then perhaps imagine that you're going down a staircase, and you'll hear me count the steps down, And the deeper you go, the less you care about ordinary thoughts and ordinary matters, because you can feel kind of like a kid at the feet of a storyteller, ready to soak in some helpful ways of thinking and imagining. 10. You're taking a step down. 9. Feeling good. 8. 7. 6. 5. 4. 3. 2. And 1. And here here you can take a step down. Here, you can give yourself credit for the relaxation that you have caused. You might give me credit for giving you instructions, but that's where my role in this ends. All the rest of it, the physical comfort, the mental relaxation, the feelings of peace, were actually caused by the thoughts you chose to listen to, so that your body would get the right message. You really do have this capability, even if it was under-recognized previously. The quality of your thoughts has been affecting the way you feel and will continue to affect the way you feel. Perhaps in your head and heart, you will begin to treat yourself like a friend. When you're talking to a friend to support and encourage them, it's easy to find the truthful and reassuring words, and the truthful and empowering words, and the truthful and inspiring words. And you don't even have to stretch the truth to tell a friend that you love them, that they're awesome, that they can do what they set their minds to. In your head and heart, you deserve no less. As an adult, you are the highest moral authority over you. Once you became an adult, you took over from your parents in deciding what's good, what's right, what's proper. And if in your assessment you're doing all right, your own opinion is the highest opinion on that matter. You'll be joining the leaders in the world when you're self-validating. You'll be joining all those who are creative and original when you turn inwardly to recognize when you're doing life well enough, to recognize when you're doing a good enough job in all of your endeavors. Too often, what you had been lacking was not anything you could consume, and not anything that you could find in another. You were lacking those voices of support and encouragement and kindness that perhaps motivated you when you were young enough to have teachers or coaches or parents sometimes say those words to you. But the good news is, as an adult, you have become your own biggest source of validation and comfort and encouragement. And when you tell yourself that things are going to be all right, the highest authority has spoken. More than anyone else on the planet, you will recognize when you're moving in a good direction. You will recognize when you're doing all right, and treating yourself as you would a friend is an excellent standard when it comes to assessing how you're doing. It is true that some of what I'm saying may contradict some ideas or perspectives you used to have, but as an adult and your own highest moral authority, you get to decide who you believe to be right. You have no obligation to believe or accept anything I say. I'm a guide. But you yourself can pick your influences, just like you pick the books you'll read, or the music you'll listen to, or the news shows you'll watch. You'll pick which opinions and thoughts and perspectives you deem worthiest of keeping. And if during this segment today, you've heard some good ideas. Ideas that with your adult conscience and judgment you deem worthy of keeping, then you'll let those good ideas resonate in your heart and body and mind, and you'll let these freely chosen ideas displace unchosen ideas from a long time ago. More and more, in your own head and heart, you'll nurture the more supportive and encouraging and kind thoughts. And I don't have to tell you what they are. They are the same thoughts you would share with a friend. They are the same thoughts you would speak to a child for them to adopt as their worldview. The same standards by which you would treat a friend or a child or a neighbor are perfectly good for you too. Take it all. Let it sink in. With all your heart and all your mind and every cell from head to toe, accept and embrace the perspectives that have resonated, that resonate as truthful. In a moment, I'm going to begin counting up. As I count, bring your attention outward, feel energy return, and as you bring your attention to the outer world, you'll still have your aliveness, you'll still have your kinder thoughts, you'll still have an imagination that's every bit as capable of generating more kind thoughts as the harsher ones. Only now you know you have choice. And you know that good things happen when you speak to yourself like a friend, and the mind-body link is very real, and your body's an excellent listener. This was always true. It's going to be true tomorrow. It's going to be true in a week, a month, a year or so. You can let it all sink in. 1. Become aware of where your hands and feet are resting. Become aware, perhaps, of where you are. Maybe other sounds. 2. Become aware, perhaps, of what you have planned afterward and how your outlook may already have changed because of today's realizations. And it's the same world out there, but you have clearer lenses through which to see your role in this world and your capabilities in this world. The world will prove that these reassuring truths are truthful, and that so much of what sent your body the wrong signals was not the truth, but actually lies, or at best ideas that have become outdated. 3. You are emerging feeling stronger, feeling more capable, feeling from head to toe refreshed and relaxed, ready to be in this world, ready to be comfortable in this world. 4. Then feel energy start from the bottoms of your feet and go all the way up to the top of your head, making you feel energized, making you feel refreshed, and making you feel wonderful in every way, knowing that you've made a change, ready to be back in this room to perceive this world through some clearer lenses. And 5. In the time you need to embrace these perspectives and be fully back in the room, then open your eyes to return back to the room that